Hello everyone, today I'd like to answer the question of whether or not you should play Naval in 2026. Now obviously, since I am a Naval player myself, the answer is going to be yes, but there are some major negatives that Naval does have that I will be addressing first in this video that I think everybody should know about and may make or break your decision. This video will have lots of comparisons to World of Warships, but I will have parts that are relevant to current War Thunder players for those of you that are still curious about joining the Naval mode. If this video does make anybody curious about joining Naval, feel free to also join my Discord for help getting into the mode. Link for that will be in the description and the pinned comment. With that being said, let's get into the negative aspects of Naval in War Thunder. And an easy one to start off with on that is the graphics. The environmental graphics in Naval are way below the standards set in World of Warships. There's weather effects that are missing, times of day that are very stagnant, and even water effects like wakes are rather lacking. Gaijin really fails to use the systems they already have to keep matches feeling different, with different types of weather and different times of day. If you go set a matchup in a custom battle, you have plenty of options that have some really cool weather effects and times of day, but Gaijin really fails to implement these into the actual matches you have when you're playing to actually grind your ships. Moving on from that, we also have the map design, which is rather lacking heavily as well. While they are based on real locations for the most part, most maps play very similarly and have little room for strategic play, as cover is almost impossible to find and you can fire between spawns on most maps. A large portion of the maps are also just completely open water, which gets extremely boring after a few repetitive matches. Some maps aren't balanced as well and give one side an advantage, while others have objectives that large ships can't reach before the battle ends just because a coastal capped them early on. Overall, the map design is kind of a mess right now, and it can feel rather bland if you sit down for a long session of playing Naval. As far as gameplay goes, most matches can be simplified down to team deathmatch with side objectives. Since most objectives are poorly positioned or exposed, many players won't directly push for them. This gets rather bland when coupled with the fact that there are only 3 varieties of games. These are 3 cap zones like World of Warships, 1 massive cap zone that teams battle to control, and a mode where you're supposed to defend an allied cargo fleet while destroying the enemy's cargo fleet. These all get rather bland when coupled together, but to be fair to Naval, this lack of objective variety is an overarching issue in War Thunder itself that players continuously bring up to the developers and they kinda just ignore the players with. Gameplay bugs and rushed content are other prevalent problems, as Gaijin will drop ships into the game with unfinished damage models or armor schemes, or issue patches that significantly break Naval to the point of being unplayable, and then fail to address these issues for months at a time, sometimes only fixing them seemingly by accident. This is extremely apparent at top tier, as it seems like the Naval servers cannot handle the loads that the top tier ships bring. Once you get to the high battle rating ships, around 7.0 and up, the servers will start rubber banding, lagging, and completely crashing matches, which wastes every player's boosters, silver lions, and time, as it can make matches nearly unplayable or just completely kick you out of them. It's a rather annoying issue to run into, and it's kind of sad that the devs haven't fixed it yet. Moving on from that though, the stock grinds with ships, especially battleships, can be extremely painful at times. Every War Thunder player knows that stock vehicles are severely hampered gameplay wise, and many times struggle to kill opposing players' vehicles. Naval is extremely similar, with many battleships only getting high explosive shells while stock, leaving them almost unable to kill enemy battleships of a similar tier. It can feel like an absolute slog to finally unlock the proper shells for a ship, despite most of them being the first modifications you can get. Speaking of the ships themselves though, while they continue to expand the Naval lines with each update, it is a negative that Naval has significantly smaller amounts of ships than World Warships, and is missing some well-known additions like the Lion class, North Carolinas, or even something as simple as the USS Indianapolis. The devs were quick to add in the massive top-tier ships like Iowa, Yamato, and Sovietsky Soyuz, but failed to really fill in the lines and have ships previous to them that can fight back against them, in some cases skipping right from early war ships to these top-tier behemoths. Coupled with a lot of the issues above, the game mode also has a fairly steep learning curve, albeit the devs have cut down on this over the past year. Managing your damage control systems, learning where and how to aim, and adjusting for the nuances of Naval's gameplay are all severely hampered by the lack of a good in-game tutorial, especially if new players try to jump straight into realistic battles, or even transition over to them from arcade, as arcade has an aiming system that is even simpler than World of Warships, making it basically point and click, while realistic requires ranging estimations, leading targets, and setting your range to a fine degree to even land a shot close to an enemy ship. And this is all explained very poorly in game, if not even explained at all. All of this leads to Naval having a much smaller player base than the other War Thunder game modes, and even World of Warships itself. I assume. I haven't checked on the player numbers in that game in a long time. Many mid to high tier naval matches will have at least a handful of bot ships sailing around to fill out the teams during matches. The bot ships can be annoying at times as they have the habit of stealing kills and can sometimes randomly detonate player vessels, though they are normally just free targets that rush for capture zones. With that being said, those are what I consider to be the major negatives of War Thunder Naval, and I'd like to move now onto the positive side of War Thunder Naval, and this is where I'll be doing a lot of my comparisons to World of Warships, as they're two very similar games that I have played in the past. And starting off, I want to go back to the environmental graphics. While I said the environmental graphics were lacking, the actual ship models, explosion effects, muzzle flashes, and smoke from the guns are all wonderfully done in War Thunder Naval, with ship damage being shown extremely well in many cases, explosions having amazing fire effects and pressure wave effects, and even individual shells having their own models as they fly through the air, rather than what World of Warships has with the generic colored shell-shaped objects flying through the air at the enemy ships. The maps themselves also have neat environmental details like small bays you can duck into, bridges that only smaller ships can sail under, and anchored fishing vessels that your ship can just plow straight through. While I also said before that every match turns into a death match, actually fighting other ships feels extremely satisfying with the Naval damage models. Naval has a lot more detailed damage models than World of Warships, with major components and crew compartments being modeled for damage, fires being a significant detonation threat, and flooding which can drag you down below if holes below your waterline are not addressed in a timely fashion. I do think it is really nice that there is no bow tanking meta in Naval like World of Warships has, as you can't really saturate the damage model and cause a pseudo damage immunity. Tanking too much damage over your bow area, for example, could drain your crew completely or destroy sections of your ship, which causes you to flood out. Ship combat itself tends to be a little bit more strategic, as instead of trying for generic citadel hits to drain a health bar, two ships dueling are basically competing to cripple each other's weaponry and propulsion or even detonate the enemy vessel, while also managing their own damage control and trying their best to dodge enemy shellfire. Since the guns, engines, bridge, and other critical modules can be taken out with good aim in Naval, it's an actual strategy to destroy turrets, while this was almost impossible in World of Warships. Naval also has significantly less RNG. With most ships, the majority of your shells will go where you aim, or will at least land close to your aiming point. This, coupled with player-controlled secondaries in anti-aircraft, makes engagements a lot more fun and dynamic, as you aren't just waiting for a main battery reload to finish and praying that RNG lets you get a hit when you actually do get to fire, while also your anti-aircraft lets you counter any pesky planes personally rather than just praying that you have enough to delete the squadron coming after you. Speaking of planes though, there are no broken carriers included in Naval. Players can spawn single planes when they sink, and try to contribute just a little bit more to the match, or can use float planes off of their ships to capture points or scout ahead of themselves. The planes are kept well in check by the sheer firepower afforded to many ships in terms of how much anti-aircraft they have, and allowing the player to take over and aim at themselves. It should also be said that there are no submarines with magic homing torpedoes either. Another thing that Naval doesn't have, thankfully, is gimmicks. You won't find ships with random additions like smokescreens, crazy reload, or speed boosters, or just generally made to be broken in order to create a flavor of the month scenario. For example, a Fletcher in one line will play basically the same as a Fletcher in another line, with the differences being in torpedoes or the amount of anti-aircraft guns on the ship. Since Naval is made to be grounded and realistic, the devs can't make up fantasy ships to boost sales, and can't copy Wargaming's method of using every middle schooler's napkin drawing as a new ship for their game. Gaijin is limited to ships that existed, or project ships that were at least partially laid down as additions to the game, keeping it much more realistic and having less of a power creep scenario. It certainly keeps them from producing a million overpowered premiums just to shake some more money out of their player base. The spotting system is also something that got thrown out in Naval compared to World of Warships. There is no disappearing ships outside of a few extremely minor cases. If you spawn a ship, you will be able to be seen outside of destroyers at extreme, say 15-kilometer ranges, and coastal boats that are outside of 4 kilometers and not being directly observed. Even though in these two cases the ships do disappear, once you point your sights at these ships, they won't be hidden anymore. This is a night and day difference than World of Warships, where you can basically build a space-age stealth vessel out of a massive World War II battleship. Naval also has ammo detonations, which were basically phased out of World of Warships due to players not enjoying the RNG of it. Since Naval lacks RNG and has 3 respawns per match, the detonation and ammo destruction mechanics work a lot better and both reward good aim while also not feeling overly detrimental, as you can just spawn another ship and go back to blasting away at the enemy team. Now I say that and most people will think that, well, it's going to tank your economy just because you sank a couple of times. Well, economy wise, Naval is actually extremely profitable with high Silver Lions gains and good research point gains that ensure that you always have plenty of silver laying around when it comes time to buy modifications or new ships. It's a game mode where you very rarely lose any Silver Lions for playing, and it's extremely hard to earn low amounts of research points. This is especially true when you factor in the skill bonuses being based on damage rather than kills, meaning you don't have to directly secure kills in order to earn bonus awards. Between all of the bonuses and the smaller amount of ships in the game versus tanks and planes, the grind is rather fast. Even the longest lines can be completely ground out in a year with just casual play. Speaking of the naval lines though, they are also organized differently than in World of Warships, with destroyers being the early ships, cruisers being your mid-tier, and battleships making up the end of the lines. Personally, I like how this is set up, as the devs are forced to use real-life values for each ship and gun performance, and they can't give destroyers and cruisers crazy buffs to put them on par with top-tier battleships. Typically, a ship will be able to damage everything it can see in its battle rating range to an extent, while bringing most destroyers to a battleship heavy match just gets you flattened like a pancake rather quickly. Overall, it feels very balanced due to this, with very few cases of ships feeling helpless against other ships in their battle rating range. In many cases, this does get corrected by the devs by changing the battle ratings, which was almost impossible with how World of Warships had its tech trees set up. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the aiming systems between both game modes of Naval. Since Naval has both arcade and realistic game modes, it allows players to choose if they want the slower, more calculating gameplay of realistic, or the faster paced and easier to learn arcade. For arcade's aiming system, you basically just have to point where you want your shells to hit, and your guns make the lead calculations for you, albeit there is some nuances to this, and dodging enemy shellfire is rather easy due to this system. In realistic, your ship gives you a rough estimation for lead, and you have to base your aim off of that while also adjusting for the range that your shots will land at, compensating for both your changes in speed and the enemies. While this system is significantly more complicated than both Arcade and World of Warships, it allows skilled players to have a significant edge over their opponents, even while said opponent is trying to actively dodge incoming shells. In my opinion, having the choice between these two systems is a significant positive, even if I also enjoyed the system that World of Warships employed. Overall, at the end of the day, I am a naval player and would highly suggest giving this game mode a try, although I do want people to be aware of the problems that this game mode does face. I do hope that people will give it a try anyways, as every time I hear news about World of Warships, it just makes me rather disappointed knowing what that game used to be. And I seriously hope Gaijin continues to improve Naval in order to pick up that slack. If you do give Naval a try, once again, feel free to join my Discord and ask questions. Everyone there is super helpful, and the link will be both in the description and the pinned comment. Good luck out there, guys. I'll see you in the next one.